G'day, I'm Richard Grimes. I grew up in Sydney. I'm the youngest of four. My family was very big into water sports, sailing, water polo, surfing, and pretty much drove the rest of my career choices as I grew up. Some of those choices were to move into the marine industry, where I was involved in the America's Cup, was involved in building ocean racing boats, sailing them here and overseas. And then as I completed some of those tasks, I realised that I had a passion for aviation. So in particular, in the sailing side of stuff, I was involved in 31 Sydney Hobart races. My father won the race in '79 on the yacht Apollo. I would have been around in my early teenage years and did some trips back from Hobart. And that grew into me doing a boat building apprenticeship and then moving into some different locations around Australia. It was like Melbourne, building some boats there, Perth doing the America's Cup, and then down to Tasmania, where we built some boats also down in that location. And maybe all of that came about because my grandfather, going 6 back, came out from Europe to be the second Surveyor General to New South Wales. So that adventurous spirit probably has stuck around for a fair bit. Yeah, on the family side of stuff, I met my wife in the 1989 Sydney Hobart race. She was the designated navigator on the vessel. I was a fly-in from Western Australia, coming out of the squadron quite late in the Christmas period, and so she'd done all the preparation for the vessel to go in the race, and then she was told on the morning of the race that she was handing over to me. So the relationship did not start out very well, but I asked if we could share the task on the way down because it's better to do that, and then you can operate the boat and sail the boat and do the navigation bits and pieces. And the navigation pieces aren't just waypoint here, waypoint there, where we're going. It's the strategy of where you're going to put the vessel based on the forecast weather, on the forecast currents that are moving, and how you position with the fleet. So the navigator is the strategist. And so being able to share that, over a 4 or 5 day race means that you can get some well-needed rest and make pretty good decisions at any hour of the day. So she accepted that. It all got on a little bit better once we got ashore, and then once we did get ashore, we had a few rum and cokes. I let my guard down, and she cracked onto me. So from there we hooked up, had kids, and went to America, and came home and then continued with that. Following that race, there was really no move to have a relationship, but the boat got picked up to represent Australia in an international event, sailing out of Hong Kong, and so it was a teamed event. So 3 Australian boats went. She was on that team, I was on that team, same boat, and the regatta. Sail around Hong Kong harbour for a few days, and then we sail across the South China Sea to the Philippines, sail around there for a few days. And at that time, Marcus, the president, had been replaced by some generals or something, so there was a coup going on, and there was, a street load of jeeps with young people, M16s and the like, and you go into the yacht club and there'd be a sign there, please hand in your weapons, and it was a bit rough, to go in there and do an international regatta, but it was there that the relationship was fostered. It's a hard race to win, and now, most of my friends don't want to do it, who had grown up as a teenager doing it with, that you were there for. I've tried to introduce it to a new generation, and they're kind of like, can see why you do it, but yeah, might not be my cup of tea. So what I'm thinking about is preparing the boat for two-handed. So we normally sail 10 up. So I'm thinking of making it a bigger challenge and just going, two-handed for the 80th Sydney Hobart race coming up in December. You know, if you win division, like you're on the chance to win the race. And so we've had 10 divisional wins. And overseas, if you win division, everyone gets a trophy and calls themselves the winner of the race and stuff. But here, to get an overall win is very difficult. It requires you to play into the hands of whoever's controlling all that weather. The size of boats vary so much from 100-footers down to 30-footers that you're sailing in different systems. Yeah, I used to have a passion for just winning. Now it's it's about the journey, and it's a tough race. So my man overboard drill is about the other people being attached to the boat. When it's dark or bad visibility or it's there's a lot of wind there. And the best main overboard drill is the one you don't have to do. So stay on board the boat. But we go through all the things you've got to do in recovering that person. But I do say to them that if it's me that goes over the side, don't bother coming back and get me, because I'm either too old or too stupid to hang on. And so that's when the end will be. So yeah, initially did the apprenticeship in country Victoria at a place called Meetung. It was a family shipyard, 100-year-old shipyard. And we built a lot of timber fishing boats and the like, moved into aluminium. And then when I had finished one of the Hobart races, I got picked up by the then winner of the Hobart race, a guy from Melbourne here called Lou Abrahams. And he wanted to do a new design. And it was the first all-carbon racing yacht, Jeff, here in Australia. And so put a very unique team together. And in about 9 months, we hand drew this vessel out full size, and handmade all the templates, hand laid all the carbon up, and then once that was completed, we took that to represent Australia in international regatta over in Hawaii. So yeah, we were not only involved in the boat building side, we were involved in the sailing side for the owner. That had us do some trips across the Pacific into San Francisco, and then got picked up for the Kookaburra America's Cup. Again, those boats were made out of a different material. They were all aluminium, but they were all hand-drawn. There was no computer-aided design at the time, no laser cutting, so you had to hand-cut all the frames, shape all the frames, and then weld it all up to the specifications from Lloyd's. But that would also have us sailing with those programs as well. Yeah, the young people, the young sailors now, they want to go into Saint-Tropez, fly in, race during the day, a couple of races during the day, go back to the bar, go to the pool, sleep, go back on the water for the day, bar, pool, that's the lay day, boat, bar, pool, airport, and that's how they want to, travel. They don't want to go out at sea in the ocean and get cold, wet, tired, hungry, spend 4 days doing that. They've got different needs now, so it's hard to get crew and get them motivated. I'd grown up with my father flying, for Qantas, so there was always an interest there. He started off with Tiger Moths and DC-3s, and then moved into Lockheed Electras and Super Constellations, 707s and then 747s. And so it was always a part of the family, the aviation thing, but I never had, the opportunity to do, excuse me, anything in that particular area until I got finished with the America's Cup. I had one, sort of free period, and so to get off the waterfront, I decided to go out to the local aerodrome in Western Australia, which was Jandakot, and I got myself the restricted pilot's licence on the Piper Tomahawk. Another friend who'd been skippering the New Zealand boat, he'd been eased off that program, and he decided that was a good idea. So both of us went out to different flight huts, picked up our 5-mile rubber band licence, and that gave me the motivation to talk to another friend who flew with the Air Force at the time, and he said, yeah, if you want to do it for a career, you can go down the commercial path or you can go down the Air Force path, and he recommended that I take the Air Force path. So there's only one small problem. I didn't have my prerequisites for high school. So on my next job, which was in Tasmania to build another ocean racing boat, I had to kind of dual hat and go back to night school and get my qualifications for the Air Force's pilot entry there. And that's pretty much, made the submission to them, and they took us up as a pilot about 6 months later. I was a student on the fighter combat instructors course. So you just needed to go through the syllabus and all that sort of stuff. So two eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. The good Lord wants to take in 4 times more than we put out. So you've just got to, move through all that stuff. But once, kind of come out of that and you had your qualifications and stuff like that, they give you a bit of a voice. But yeah, not everyone wanted to hear that, because just the way the structure of the Air Force was, and needing to have quite heavy supervision and the like to, not compromise safety of flight things. So when sometimes, like the safety of flight things can compromise your combat readiness. And so that was the struggle that existed in the different communities between the Marine Corps and the Royal Australian Air Force. And I know when I told this to my mate Snuffy, he was nodding a lot about going, yeah, I know what you're talking about. When I did join Cubic, I was asked by the senior representative there, who's former Army infantry, mechanised infantry, Mark Horn. And he said, hey Grubby, we've got the Air Force, we've done a lot of Army things, we've done some Navy things, and can you see if you can get something organised for an award or something for the F-18? Anyway, a little while went past, and I was thinking, I don't know what, we've got all these awards that you give people, weapons awards and Ducks of the Course and academics and all this sort of stuff, and then the F-18 started to retire, and so it started, squadrons were being retired, and the new F-35 was coming in. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. I might have an opportunity here to do a Cubic award for the person that has provided the most combat capability to the community. And so there's going to be a big ball out there at the Hunter, and Boeing is sponsoring it and all these other people sponsoring it. But any of the sponsors weren't allowed any airtime, during the ball. But I got on the main program, and Raisin Waylon Kane went up there, and he delivered these 3 awards, not 1, but 3. And each of the awards was an ACMI pin that they could put on their lapel, and a professional development travel voucher. And those 3 recipients are, were picked not by me, but by their peers. I only wanted 1, and then in the end, the community said, "Well, you choose." And I was unable to choose, so I ended up having to give out 3 awards. During that time, the 5 children that have been responsible for bringing up have all been exposed to similar sports and things on the water, and the youngest 2, the twins, Jess and Tom, have sailed a lot together and moved to Sydney to do some university work in aerospace engineering and in the legal side. And with their efforts and work around their love of competition sailing, they got picked up and won 2 world championships, one in Cherbourg for the university games, and then they got picked up to represent Australia for the World Match Racing Youth Championships in Yekaterinburg in Russia, which they brought home the gold as well. So yeah, they've picked up the passion. I've told them to stay out of aviation and just look after your things in the maritime side and complete your studies, and that's the advice I give them. Yeah, so I've got to get a 14-year story out in about 5 or 10 minutes, but I'll see if I can give it a crack. So I was just talking to my good mate Snuffy the other day, and said we trained on the CD4 at Point Cook in Victoria. That's a propeller, trainer, ab initio kind of thing. And then from there you move to Perth and fly the We flew the MB326 Air Macchi. It was an Italian light attack aircraft. And everyone in the Australian Air Force goes through jet training, which is kind of unique for Australia. And then out of that course, which was 149 pilots course, it started with 30, finished with 18, and then you make your preference of where you'd like to go next. And mine was to go on to fly fighters. And so I was a group of about 5 out of that 18 that got selected to go to fighters. We started up a new squadron in Perth at the time, number 25 squadron, with the MB326Hs, and that was to transition people to lead-in fighter training. That formal course is done on the east coast at RAF Base Williamtown, so that takes another 3 months of flight training, and then you have to wait for a position in the F-18 training course. And during that time, waiting for the F-18 course, I might have accrued about 500 flight hours on that aircraft, and we took that pretty much around Asia, supporting the firepower defence agreements and doing fleet training support for our Navy, support for our Army in close air support missions. After that, which was around 1991, I did the F-18 conversion at Williamtown and was posted to number 3 squadron as a pilot. A few years there, a tour, and I was eligible to do an exchange tour with the Marine Corps in the United States. And so over to California. The family had started to build at that stage, which ended up with us with some fairly young children. 3 boys, 2 girls, a pair of twins, and a set of Californians. But whilst we were there, I'd say, flying with the United States Marine Corps, it's all about combat readiness. And I would say that would be, all the flying I've done, both here in Australia and overseas, I'd have to say that the Marine Corps challenged me more than anywhere else I flew. As I said, they're about getting inside the decision cycle, and they got inside my decision cycle as a friendly person, let alone as an opposition force. And so I had to relearn a lot of things. It was very uncomfortable for that first 6-month period, but then I kind of started to understand how they operated, and it was magnificent. The way they operated, the way they talked, the way they thought, it was all based on, John Boyd and his works early in their Marine Corps career. So what I did was I was like a sponge, and I just tried to take up as much as I could. I added a little bit back into their stuff. And so my challenge now is to try and bring that back to Australia. But Australia's very structured and they like to hold the supervision quite high. And so then they're not into the operating concepts for manoeuvre, sort of warfare, like, John Boyd speaks to. So I struggled a little bit in trying to make that work for the Royal Australian Air Force, but continued to work with them. I graduated as a fighter combat instructor, and you'll see in some of the photos there, we had a really good rapport with our students in trying to realise their dream, whereas the previous cadre of instructors were looking probably for more reasons to protect their little environment and their,
status quo.
Yeah. And so that took a lot of changing to, nurture those people and give them an opportunity to pass and achieve their goals. So, yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge I had, back with the Royal Australian Air Force coming out of working with the Marine Corps. Boyd looked at the way the Marine Corps performed combat operations, not only in the air but on the ground and on the amphibious sort of stuff. And so the Marines were kind of like, there's a term, but I'll make an example. If you liken it to World War I, where you just throw the masses over out of the trenches and go for it. Whereas the manoeuvre warfare was all about reaching back to Sun Tzu, finding all of the examples of where they had success, and up into modern periods like Blitzkrieg, and discovering why they were successful out of those things. And it's about called mission command, and it's about pushing your workload down to your junior officers. You have implied trust, okay, and they've been given the tool sets they need to take the initiative and go out there and win. There were some other great things, working with, as I said, all the up and coming pilots that you're training, who we'll meet down here at Avalon probably over the next few days. We're all sitting in star ranks and like to come along to the booth and say hello. One of the things they'll probably remind me of is in 2001, just before I got out of uniform, I was leading a large force package back. Everyone had landed except myself. It was about 9 p.m. at night, and you're supposed to come into the airfield about 300 knots. I was the last person, so I think I might have had 500 knots on the dial. and as I did the turn to get ready to configure the aircraft for landing, I lowered the landing gear, and the 12-foot long dummy missile that was mounted on the side decided to release. It was inadvertently released from the aircraft, and being close to the centre line, an aircraft moving around, you're putting the gear and the flaps down. I didn't kind of notice it, but when I landed and did a walk around to check that I had everything, I noticed that it was missing when the door was chopped up and the tyres were chopped up. And so fortunately that missile, the speed at which I was doing, which kind of wasn't in the legal sense the right speed, but the speed I was doing meant that I wasn't in the urban area. And so it fell onto someone's Land Rover, 1964 Land Rover, destroyed that, but it was inert. It didn't have any explosives in it. But I was then the recipient of some paintings on the side of my aircraft, which represented a Land Rover from the United Kingdom guys. There's a few cartoons. We made the front page of the Northern Territory Times, and then third page of the national papers, where Toyota ran an ad and had a title, "Finally Someone's Figured Out How to Destroy a Land Cruiser. Go to your nearest dealer if you want it to survive anything except a direct missile attack." So that was a noteworthy event getting towards the end of my career in uniform. And then from there, I was probably out for a couple of weeks, and I got a phone call from the people I used to work with, and then I went in to help them upgrade the aircraft with things that I'd flown with in the Marine Corps. And now they started to listen. And so I tended to probably have more influence out of uniform than I had in uniform. And so I've continued to do that for the next 20 years, doing threat replication for the exercises, or capability development for the aircraft, or back in doing commercial simulation work for the original Hornet or the Super Hornet. And then in 2017, got a phone call from Cubic, and they said, "Any chance you can help us with this instrumentation device that was designed and built for the Top Gun school by Cubic in San Diego back in the 70s?" And just happened to be the same person that rang me was the same person that I was on exchange with in the United States Marine Corps, who then came and exchanged with us out in Australia for Op Falconer with 75 Squadron. And that's Waylon Kane, who I understand you'll be interviewing Raisin at the air show tomorrow. We did some drug ops missions and stuff over there that I can't tell you about, but it was Emilio Escobar, and he's running around with submarines and shit, trying to get his cocaine and that across the border. But yeah, you get a lot of satisfaction from seeing those people come up and want to say hello. We know they're all pretty busy, but they afford their time, to come and visit during the show, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and you might not have seen them for 5 years, plus years, 10 years. But what's interesting is you know they're mates because the conversation picks up from where it left off. They're not complaining that you haven't been in contact with them. Yeah. People have got to choose what they want to do with their lives, and I chose the things I did because that was a passion for me, probably through my upbringing, and my peers are doing it, and the competitive nature of ocean racing and testing yourself and being there for your mates, you know, when they need you, would be my main driver. In the aviation side, it was commercial aviation, so I suppose that you could take some of the same themes out and plonk them on top of the reasons and the rationale and the motivation for doing the same things. So right now, where do I lie? I do a bit of both of the maritime thing and a little bit of I'm exposed in the aviation side as well. And I find them both complementary.